So AOC had a controversial vote the other day. And I don't know if everybody knows about it, because if you're not on Twitter, you probably did not see this at all. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about it. You know, I call it the AOC sneaky vote. You know, she kind of try to sneak, her way with this. But we caught you. We caught you. Now, that vote is really interesting, considering that she is also commending Bernie Sanders for bringing that bill to the Senate floor, where he wanted to stop arms to Israel. Right. So, of course, most of the senators voted against that, but there were about 19 senators that voted for it, which I think is the most that we've seen so far. But she was commending Bernie Sanders for that. And Bernie gave us the warning about that bill earlier on. Listen to this. He told people it was coming.
A war which has killed more than 43,000 Palestinians and injured over 102,000, 60% of whom are women, children, or elderly people. All of this death and destruction is being supported by U.S. taxpayers, who have provided in recent times over $18 billion in military aid to Israel and delivered more than 50,000 tons of armaments and military equipment. In other words, as Americans, we are complicit. That is why I am now leading the effort in the Senate to block additional offensive arms sales to Israel through joint resolutions of disapproval.
So he did proceed with that the other day. Again, I told you how the votes worked there. One of the things I noticed that Bernie was doing with this is that he is not calling it a genocide. He's still not calling it a genocide. He's still referring to it as a war. Did you notice that? Did you notice that he's still repeating old death toll numbers, right? Like, so we still really believe it's 43,000 people at this point. So listen, AOC and Bernie Sanders, they're still trying to play this game where they'll speak up to do the right thing if they're pressured to do so, or they'll do it in such a way that still gives them room to be a part of the establishment, wing of the Democratic Party, and they won't be blackballed. That's what they do. So keep an eye on that. The fact that he's still not calling it a genocide. Now, there were 19 senators. I want to show you who they are so maybe one of these senators are yours. Thank you to the 19 senators who took a stand for human rights by voting to block the arms sales to Israel. So we have Schatz, Murphy, Ossoff, Warnock, Hirano, Durbin, Markey, Warren, Van Hollen, King, Smith, Shaheen, Sanders, Merkley, Welch were the co-sponsors. And then you have Hemley, Henrik, Lujan, and Kaine, Tim Kaine of all people, right? So these are the senators that voted in support of an arms embargo to Israel. Now, why is this important? AOC is playing a game. Let me show you what she just did. So she says, thank you, Senator Sanders, for leading this effort to block further offensive weapons to the Israeli government, and to every one of these 18 senators for affirming that the United States must uphold its own laws and commitments to international human rights. Now, if you did not look any further, you would have just seen this. The Bernie bill that was brought to the floor and voted on in the Senate, and AOC saying, thank you to Bernie Sanders. I agree. This is the right thing to do. And you would not have seen this because there was also another vote that took place, and that was in the House. Remember that bill, HR 1449, the Anti-Semitism bill? That was voted on in the House. And how did AOC vote on that bill? Let's take a look. This is Resolution 1449. Let's check and see how this works. So first of all, I want to point out 193 Republicans voted yes, and 195 Democrats voted yes. For whatever reason, more Democrats voted in support of this bill instead of Republicans. Now, why is this bill problematic? What did I tell you before about this bill? This bill conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. This bill makes it difficult for you to be able to criticize Israel. So, knowing what I just told you, why in the hell did AOC, because they list the names, folks, okay? Why did AOC vote for this bill? Let's go. We can see her name here. There it is. I'll highlight it for you so you can see. AOC right there. She voted for it, knowing what I just told you. That's right, Bill Bobby. She did vote for it. She did vote for it. So you see, on one hand, she's thanking Bernie Sanders for bringing that bill to the floor to stop sending arms to Israel and saying she agrees with that. But when it's time for her to vote, she's voting in such a way that could harm your speech. She voted for the anti-Semitism bill. This is why I continue to say, stop focusing on what they say and pay attention to what they do. So this little sneaky, underhanded thing, of course, she didn't announce this. She didn't say anything about this. And I'm going to show you who voted against it. There were only 3 Democrats that voted against this bill. All the Democrats that voted against it, their name is in italics. So you can see it here, right? Cori Bush voted against it. Ilhan Omar voted against it. Rashida Tlaib voted against it. So you have 3 members of the squad that voted against it, and AOC voted for it. So first things first, folks, stop calling them the squad. This is something new we're going to do on this show. We are going to stop referring to them as the squad. You know why? A squad sticks together. Cori Bush told us a while back, she said, no, they vote on their own. She said, yeah, we all came from Justice Democrats, but when we vote on our own. So let's remember that. Cori was right about that. At least she was honest. So stop calling them a squad. They're not a squad. They're not together. We're not even going to call them a team, because a team sticks together. A team works together as a team. What they are individuals that were all a part of the same organization called Justice Democrats, and they all happen to win, but they are not a squad and they are not a team. My coach always told me there is no I in team. So you know that she was wrong anytime you see Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar vote against it. But this isn't the first time. You see, she did it before. A lot of people just didn't notice this. It should be worth noting that AOC voted on a resolution that references the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which would label criticism of the Zionist colony as anti-Semitic. It is not surprising. She's done it before. In 2023, she voted for Res 888, for example, which stated, resolve that the House of Representatives reaffirms the state of Israel's right to exist, recognizes that denying Israel's right to exist is a form of anti-Semitism, rejects calls for Israel's destruction and the elimination of the only Jewish state, and condemns the Hamas-led terrorist attack on Israel. So this isn't the first time, ladies and gentlemen. Not the first time. Now, I do want to show you, to be fair, what did Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib say about this particular piece of legislation? This is why I said stop calling them a squad. Don't call them no squad. Don't call them no team. Don't even do that. Shout out to Lindsay Bellant for sharing this. Rashida Tlaib. I strongly oppose anti-Semitism and have spent my career working against all forms of hate. I oppose this resolution because It embraces the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which dangerously conflates criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism. I share the concerns of groups like Jewish Voices for Peace, Ben the Ark, B'Tselem, Amnesty International, and the ACLU that the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism will be used to stifle dissent and chill free speech, especially Palestinian human rights advocacy. The resolution also does not recognize that the fight against anti-Semitism is connected to our fight against Islamophobia, racism, white nationalism, and all other forms of hate. That's Rashida Tlaib. Ilhan Omar's statement, Cori Bush's statement. I condemn anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and bigotry, period. Res 1449 relies on the flawed IHRA definition, conflating valid criticism of the Israeli government with anti-Semitism. Standing against hate must never come at the cost of silencing valid, necessary critiques. Ilhan Omar, I voted against it because the bill endorses the harmful definition of the IHRA that dangerously conflates legitimate criticism of Israel to anti-Semitism and further harms our ability to address anti-Semitism. While I condemn anti-Semitism unequivocally, this resolution does nothing to combat anti-Semitism. I will continue to stand against any attempt to silence genuine concerns of the Israeli government as anti-Semitism. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you before, AOC is playing a game, and what she says isn't always what she does. So pay attention to that. You know what else was really strange? You know who else voted for that bill? Jamal Bowman. Jamal Bowman, who just had the interview with Ronnie Akalik where he was criticizing AIPAC and the pressure that they put on Congress members. Jamal Bowman did not win his reelection. He will not be in Congress next year. So why did Jamal Bowman vote for it? They can't be trusted. They cannot be trusted. Now you're asking about that definition. I want you to hear this broken down bit here from Al Jazeera, where they talk about how they were changing the definition.
Core of this hysteria, at the core of this manufacturing of anti-Semitism on campuses, is who is defining anti-Semitism and how it's being defined. In 2005, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance published a working definition of anti-Semitism. And while the definition itself doesn't mention Israel, among the 11 examples of anti-Semitism it does give, 7 include Israel. The ERA definition of anti-Semitism, which is vague, conflates Israel and its actions with Jewish people, a conflation that's been criticized as not only dangerous for the safety of Jews, but also as suppressing any and all criticism of Israel. Compare this definition to the one set out in the Jerusalem Declaration in 2021. While it also received criticism for erasing the Palestinian experience, the Jerusalem Declaration not only provides a clear, concise definition, but it also explicitly states that anti-Zionism and support for Palestinian freedom between the river and the sea are not anti-Semitic. In other words, there's not just one definition out there for anti-Semitism, but it's the ERA definition that is used by pro-Israel advocacy groups, the State Department, and this year, in the midst of anti-genocide protests across the United States, the House adopted the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which mandates that the Department of Education adopt the ERA definition. And the way this really, by the way, shows up in media coverage and national discourse on anti-Semitism on campuses is through the language of categorization, specifically the delineation made between Jewish students and pro-Palestinian students. It's a very cynical use of language. First, it makes the default position of Jewish students, and thus all Jews, to be pro-Israel, and pro-genocide. We see Jewish identity explicitly weaponized in service of, again, a genocide overseen by a country that claims to represent all Jews. But this is, of course, demonstrably false, especially.
And then she gets into obviously the campus protest and all that stuff. But I wanted you to hear about how they're changing that definition. And that is really important. You don't see this happen for any other group. And I have to say this repeatedly, guys. I have never seen Congress move this quickly to help any other group in this country. And people need to start calling that out. Now, shout out to Blakely, because Blakely did warn people a couple of months ago that that bill was making its way around and that it was coming. She says AOC is full of it. Listen to this.
Do you guys remember a few months ago at the DNC when they trotted out AOC to talk about how Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were working tirelessly for a ceasefire? Okay, well, we knew that that was bullshit then, but tell me why she came out today and on the one hand, praise Bernie Sanders, trying to bring up a bill that would stop the sale of offensive weapons to the Israeli regime, which, real quick detour on that, it's amazing how all the people in the Zionists that are like, we care so much about the safety of Jewish people, become whole David Duke anti-Semites the second that Bernie Sanders doesn't act how they want him to. Like, literally, like, you should go on Twitter and look at what the Zionists are saying about Bernie Sanders. Because he's Jewish, because he brought up this bill, now all the Zionists are attacking him in like the most psychotic ways. It really kind of takes the mask off the whole thing, you know, really shows us what they really actually care about, and it's not anti-Semitism. And Joe Biden, who is a Zionist lunatic, and his administration are literally lobbying for it to fail. Biden, who's not really there, but his administration, and yes, that includes Kamala Harris, are going to the Hill to lobby for the senators to vote against stopping arms shipments to the Israeli regime. So just on his way out the door, he's just reminding us how awful he is. So I don't want to hear but Joe Biden, he's such a good man. The administration was working tirelessly for a ceasefire. No, they're monsters. Even in the weak-ass attempt that the Senate Democrats made, the Biden administration and the White House could not help but go down there and try to lobby against it, because that's how committed they are to this genocide. And then I also heard that Chuck Schumer was lobbying against it, and so was AIPAC, of course. Chuck Schumer is trash, okay? The fact that Chuck Schumer keeps getting reelected, and the fact that he is such a loser, but he keeps getting to be in charge of the Senate. Like, you guys just like being losers. Chuck Schumer is a loser, and yet you keep making him the leader. And he's the one pushing for this. He's one of the ones lobbying against this. He's also the one that is planning on bringing up the so-called Stop Anti-Semitism bill, which you'll remember from a couple months ago I talked about. It is a full frontal assault on the First Amendment. And he's trying he doesn't want to just bring it up by itself because he's a coward. He wants to attach it to a must-pass bill that's going to pass with the rest of the defense bill that passes every year. Defense bill that
So you guys hear this? He's going to try to mix this in with another bill that must pass. This is what they do. This is why they don't want single issue bills.
Passes every year. It's just a money laundering operation, okay? To the military industrial complex. But that's what his sneaky ass is doing, okay? So I don't know if you're still following me at this point, but today they brought up another House resolution, the same one they had brought up a few months ago, repassing it in the House, and now they want to bring it to the Senate. That's the one that Chuck Schumer wants to actually add to the bill. And only 28 people voted against it. 28. That's so embarrassing. Remember what I always tell you. When something is bipartisan like that, it's always to screw you. Because whenever it is something that would actually help a regular person, it's all, listen, guys, we're just really polarized. You know, Republicans and Democrats and the parliamentarian and Joe Manchin and the filibuster. But then when it comes to things that are for the ruling class or for the Israeli regime, all of a sudden, bipartisanship rules the day. You know, kumbaya, hand in hand, everybody's on the same page, including AOC, who voted for this today. So as on one hand, she is praising Bernie Sanders, she's voting for that trash ass Stop Anti-Semitism bill, which is nothing more than an attack on Americans' free speech. It is an attempt to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and to conflate any criticism of the Israeli regime with anti-Semitism. This is some of the language. So understand this. If you're an American, you can criticize your own government, but not theirs. If you can't criticize a foreign government, you don't live in a free country. And don't let the right wing off the hook with this one either, because all these so-called free speech words haven't said shit.
And there it is. And that's why I wanted you guys to see that, because that is the brutal reality. So AOC, like I told you, she's playing a game. She's still trying to appeal to both sides. So it's like, let me go ahead and thank Bernie Sanders why I'm voting for this bill that is doing the opposite of what I'm trying to do. She's trying to be on both sides because she's probably like, well, I don't want them to come after my seat like they came after Cori Bush or whatever. And people wonder why some people call her AOCIA. People wonder why. It's a game that she is playing with people. I really do hope that someone will run against AOC and like really just like she's got to go. Somebody needs to run against her because she's developed a hell of an ego. She's probably one of the biggest political con artists in Congress. And she still has people believing that she is grassroots and she's a dim socialist and all this kind of stuff because she still gets the grassroots support, but she's still operating with the machine. She's still moving with the machine. She's still moving with the establishment. It's like, you can't sit up there and continue to say that you're for the people and you're for the grassroots and you're for, the Palestinians, and you're voting in a way that goes against that. So you don't hear her talking about the way that she voted. Pay attention to that. Some of us called it out for quite some time. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.